The clinking of silverware was the only sound at the table. I sat across from Charles, my father-in-law, trying to hide the sweat on my palms by gripping my napkin too tightly. Rachel smiled beside me, reaching under the table to squeeze my hand. She wanted this dinner to go smoothly, but I could feel the tension before a single word was spoken. Charles finally leaned back in his chair, his sharp eyes scanning me like I was some stranger trying to sell him something. His voice was calm, almost too calm, when he asked, "So, Ethan, what do you do for a living?" I swallowed, forcing myself to answer honestly. "I'm a delivery driver." The words left my mouth plain and simple, but the reaction was immediate. His fork froze halfway to his mouth. Rachel's smile faltered. The air turned heavy, as though my answer had sucked all the warmth out of the room. Charles set his fork down and folded his hands, staring at me in silence for a long moment. It was the kind of silence that wasn't empty. It was filled with judgment. My chest tightened. I could feel his disappointment pouring across the table, and it burned. "A delivery driver," he finally repeated, his tone low and flat. "That's what you're proud of." I wanted to defend myself, to tell him how hard I worked, how every day I got up early and came home late just to keep a roof over our heads. I wanted to explain that it wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. But his eyes cut into me so deeply that my voice stayed trapped in my throat. Rachel shifted nervously. "Dad, Ethan works hard. He's reliable." But Charles raised his hand, stopping her. "Rachel, please." I asked him. He leaned toward me, his stare unblinking. "You expect me to believe you can take care of my daughter with deliveries?" My face heated, and I tried to keep my voice steady. "I may not make as much as you, sir, but I love Rachel. I'll always provide for her the best I can." Charles shook his head slowly, almost in pity. His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Love is easy to say. Responsibility, that's another matter." He tapped his finger against the table. "Tell me, Ethan, do you really think a man driving packages around deserves my daughter?" The room felt colder. My throat went dry. That question hung in the air like a knife. And for the first time, I realized this dinner wasn't about getting to know me. It was a test. One I had already failed. I never grew up with much. My childhood was simple, sometimes too simple. My mother worked double shifts as a nurse, and my father fixed cars in a small shop that barely paid the bills. We didn't have vacations, we didn't eat at fancy restaurants, and new clothes were rare. But we had love, and we had respect. My parents always told me that honest work, no matter how small, was never something to be ashamed of. I believed that, at least until I married into Rachel's world. Rachel was nothing like the people I grew up around. She was bright, graceful, and carried herself with a kind of ease that made everyone turn when she walked into a room. We met in college, when I was working nights at a pizza place to pay for my classes. She came in one evening with her friends, laughing like she didn't have a single worry in the world. I still remember how she noticed me behind the counter, how she smiled when most others didn't even look twice. That smile made me believe maybe I was worth noticing too. We started talking, then dating. At first, I felt out of place around her. She had expensive bags, friends with shiny cars, and stories of trips abroad. I had old sneakers, a second-hand bike, and stories about saving enough for textbook. But she never judged me. She told me I made her feel safe, that I grounded her. She said love was more important than money, and I wanted to believe her with everything in me. Marriage came sooner than most expected. I was nervous, wondering if her family would think I was just trying to rise above my station. Rachel swore her father would come around, that Charles might be strict, but deep down he wanted her happiness. I wanted to believe her again, so I did. I thought love could bridge the gap between a delivery driver's paycheck and a millionaire's pride. Charles, though, was a different story. From the first handshake, I could feel he didn't see me as an equal. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a presence that filled every room he entered. A self-made businessman, Rachel told me. He built his empire from nothing, yet somehow looked down on me for doing the same in my own small way. When he asked about my job, his eyes would narrow just slightly, like the word driver was too dirty to pass through his ear. Rachel always defended me. She would put her hand on mine at dinners, smile at me when her father's words grew sharp, and whisper later that she was proud of me. But I saw the weight in her eyes. I knew she was caught in the middle, torn between the man she married and the father who raised her. It wasn't fair, yet I couldn't blame her. Family ties run deep, and Charles had always been the center of her world. For me, every day was a battle with myself. I worked long hours, delivering groceries, packages, and meals to strangers' doors. Sometimes people didn't even look at me when they grabbed their deliveries. Sometimes they muttered, "Thanks," without making eye contact. At the end of the day, my back ached, my legs burned, and I smelled like the inside of my car. But I did it for Rachel. Still, deep inside, I wondered if it would ever be enough. The difference between Rachel's life and mine was like night and day. She had grown up in a house with chandeliers, polished floors, and staff who cooked meals. I grew up fixing a broken heater with my dad during winter, wearing jackets indoors until we could save enough for repairs. Now married, I tried to ignore the whispers from her extended family, the polite smiles, the quick glances at my clothes, the way conversations shifted when I entered the room. But Charles never whispered. He didn't need to. His silence at that dinner, the look of disappointment when I said delivery driver, cut deeper than words. I felt small, like a boy trying to sit at the grown men's table. He had built businesses, employed hundreds, worn tailored suits. And there I was, with calloused hands and a job most people avoided eye contact with. Still, I loved Rachel. That was the truth that kept me steady. I loved the way she laughed when I told a bad joke, the way she fell asleep on my shoulder, the way she believed in me even when I doubted myself. But love, I was beginning to realize, doesn't erase insecurity. It doesn't silence a father's disapproval or fix the gap between two different worlds. All I wanted was respect. Not wealth, not status, just to be seen as enough for the woman I loved. But respect was the one thing Charles held tightly, like a prize I had no right to claim. And every day, I could feel it slipping further away. It was late, the night after that dinner. Rachel and I had gone to her parents' house to pick up some things she'd left behind. Charles was in his study, the door half open, light spilling into the hallway. Rachel went in alone, saying she just wanted a quick word with her father. I stayed back, telling myself it wasn't my place to interrupt. I paced the hall, trying not to listen. But then I heard my name. Rachel, Charles said, his voice low and firm. You can't stay with that boy. He has nothing to offer you. My chest tightened. I froze where I stood, every word slicing deeper. Dad, please, Rachel whispered. Ethan is my husband. I love him. Love, Charles snapped, the word sharp like it disgusted him. Love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't buy a home or secure a future. He drives deliveries. Deliveries. Is that the life you want for yourself? To struggle? To watch him come home exhausted, barely able to put food on the table? I pressed my back against the wall, my hands trembling. I knew he disapproved, but hearing it said aloud was different. It felt like someone tearing open a wound I'd tried to keep covered. Dad, he works hard, Rachel said, her voice breaking a little. You don't see how much effort he puts in. He may not be rich, but he's kind, he's loyal. Charles cut her off. Kindness doesn't build a future. Loyalty doesn't put you in the circles you belong to. You were raised for more than this, Rachel. You deserve more. You think Ethan is enough now, but in 5 years? 10. When you want children, when you want stability, you'll resent him, and by then it'll be too late. The silence that followed was worse than the words. I waited for Rachel to answer, to defend me, to push back harder. But all I heard was a soft sigh. Dad, she finally said, so quietly I almost missed it. I don't know what to say. Something inside me cracked. My own wife didn't know what to say. My throat burned, and before I knew it, I was walking down the hall, pushing open the door. Both of them looked up, Charles calm, Rachel startled. I heard everything, I said, my voice shaking with anger I couldn't hold back. You think I'm not good enough for her, Charles? Fine. But Rachel, you don't know what to say? After everything we've been through. Rachel stood quickly. Ethan, it's not what you think. I was just. Not what I think. I snapped. Your father just told you to leave me. He said I'm nothing. And you didn't even defend me. Her eyes filled with tears. I was trying to keep the peace. You don't understand, Ethan. He's my father. I laughed bitterly, though it didn't feel like laughter. I get it now. It's me or him, isn't it? And you're too scared to choose. Charles leaned back in his chair, watching us like it was a show he had scripted. See, Rachel? He's already showing his temper. You think this man can give you a stable life? Stop! Rachel shouted at him, but her voice cracked. She turned back to me. Ethan, please. I love you. I'm caught in the middle. I shook my head, my chest heavy with a mix of pain and rage. The middle isn't enough, Rachel. Not when it comes to us. Not when your father thinks I don't deserve you. The room felt too small, the air too heavy. I couldn't look at either of them anymore. I turned and walked out, Rachel calling my name behind me, Charles silent but smug. That night, lying awake in bed, I knew something had shifted. Love wasn't going to be enough to survive this. If I wanted to keep Rachel, if I wanted to keep my dignity, I had to prove I was more than what Charles saw, a man with nothing. And in that moment, I swore I would. The days after that argument felt heavy. Rachel tried to act normal, but I could feel the silence between us. She still smiled, still kissed me goodnight, but her mind was somewhere else. I knew where. It was stuck on her father's words. Every time she stared off, I could almost hear them echoing in her head. You deserve more. You'll resent him. I told myself I would prove Charles wrong. I wanted him to see I wasn't just some delivery driver drifting through life. I started pushing harder at work, volunteering for longer routes, saving every extra dollar I could. When Rachel's cousin mentioned her father's company needed drivers for their distribution branch, I jumped at the chance. I thought, this is it. If I can get my foot in his world, he'll finally see I'm serious. I showed up for the interview wearing my best shirt and tie, nervous but hopeful. The manager looked at my resume, nodded politely, and said they'd be in touch. A week later, I got the call. I didn't get the job. At first, I thought maybe I wasn't qualified enough. But later that night, one of the other drivers I knew pulled me aside and said, "Man, I shouldn't even tell you this, but Charles, he told the manager not to hire you. Said you were unreliable." I stood frozen. My chest burned. Unreliable? I'd never missed a shift in my life. I realized then, it wasn't about the job. It was about keeping me in my place. When I came home, Rachel was waiting at the table, her father's voice still lingering on her. "Maybe you should think about going back to school," she suggested carefully. "Dad says." I cut her off. Dad says. Rachel, do you even hear yourself anymore? Do you know how it feels, knowing your father is out there ruining my chances before I even get them? She looked at me with tears in her eyes. He just wants what's best for me. I slammed my fist on the table. And what about what's best for me? For us? Or does that not matter? The fight ended with Rachel crying in the bedroom and me sitting alone on the couch, staring at the walls. I wanted to go to her, but my pride held me back. The more I tried, the more walls I hit. A friend of mine put in a good word at a logistics company. I thought maybe I could move up from driving to coordinating routes. But when I showed up for the interview, I saw Charles in the lobby, shaking hands with the CEO. He gave me one glance, just a single cold look, and I knew the interview was already lost. Sure enough, I got a rejection email the next day. The humiliations piled up. Charles started making little comments in front of Rachel's relative. "Still driving boxes around?" He'd say casually at family dinners, loud enough for everyone to hear. Or, "I wonder how Rachel manages with such a modest income." Everyone would laugh politely, pretending it was a joke, but the sting cut deep. Rachel tried to smooth things over, but I saw how she began to pull back. She started spending more time at her parents' house. She'd come home late, saying her dad wanted to talk, or her mom needed her help. When she was with me, her smile was thinner, her laugh shorter. And every time money came up, rent, bills, groceries, I saw the doubt flicker in her eyes. I couldn't blame her entirely. Charles had a way of planting seeds. He didn't shout, didn't threaten. He just kept repeating, "You deserve better. You'll regret this life." And slowly, I saw those words take root in her. Inside me, a war raged. Part of me wanted to keep my head down, endure the insults, and fight quietly for a chance to rise. But another part of me screamed with pride. Why should I have to prove my worth to a man who judged me before he even knew me? Why should I bow my head when I'd built an honest life with my own hands? But pride doesn't pay rent. Pride doesn't erase the disappointment in your wife's eyes. So I swallowed it, day after day, until it felt like I was choking on my own silence. The breaking point came one weekend when Rachel and I went to her parents' house for a family gathering. Charles stood at the head of the table, glass of wine in hand, telling stories about his success. Then, in front of everyone, he turned to me and said, "Ethan, tell us, how many deliveries did you make this week? 100? 200? You must be very proud." The room chuckled. My face burned hot. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I looked at Rachel, hoping for her to stand up for me, but she just sat there, eyes lowered, saying nothing. That was the moment I realized I was completely alone. My wife couldn't protect me, my father-in-law hated me, and my own work, the thing I had always been proud of, was turned into a punchline. That night, when we got home, I sat in the dark living room long after Rachel had gone to bed. The city outside was alive with noise, but inside, the silence was crushing. My chest ached with anger, sadness, and shame all tangled together. I thought about my parents, about how they taught me dignity and honest work. But I also thought about Charles, about how easily he was pulling Rachel away from me, how quickly he was turning my own wife against me. And in that moment, the question burned inside. It was Rachel's mother's birthday, a big event at their house with relatives, business partners, and friends gathered under one roof. The place was full of laughter, music, and clinking glasses. I stood near the edge of the room, feeling out of place in my plain suit. Everyone else looked polished, expensive, like they belonged to a world I had only stepped into by marrying Rachel. Rachel moved gracefully among the guests, smiling and chatting. But she barely looked at me. I tried not to let it sting, but it did. I told myself tonight I would stay calm. I wouldn't give Charles the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. Then Charles tapped his glass and called for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, smiling with his arm around his wife. "Thank you for being here tonight to celebrate my beautiful wife's birthday. Family is everything, and nothing makes me prouder than the family we've built." There was applause, cheers, and laughter. But then his eyes found me across the room. His smile sharpened. "Of course," he continued, "family also means making sure our children make the right choices in life." He paused just long enough for the room to grow quiet. "Some choices, I'll admit, I've never agreed with. Whispers rippled through the guests. My heart thudded in my chest. I knew where this was going. He raised his glass toward me. Take Ethan, for example, a delivery driver, a man of simple means. I've tried to respect my daughter's decision, but as a father, I must ask myself, did she really choose wisely? Laughter broke out from a few corners of the room. My face burned. I looked at Rachel, desperate for her to speak to stop this. But she stood frozen, her lips pressed tight, eyes avoiding mine. Charles wasn't finished. He set down his glass and said loudly, "The truth is, I never wanted this marriage. I told Rachel she was making a mistake. And now," he looked directly at her, "now even she has begun to see what I saw all along." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" I said, my voice cracking but loud enough for everyone to hear. The room went silent. Rachel's face turned pale. Charles smiled coldly. "Tell him, Rachel. Or shall I?" She shook her head, tears welling. "Dad, please." Charles cut her off. "She's been coming to me, Ethan, asking if she made the right choice. Wondering if she tied herself to a man who can't give her the life she deserves." It felt like the ground opened beneath me. I stared at Rachel, my wife, my partner, and saw the truth written on her face. She had doubts. She hadn't told me, but she had told him. My chest hollowed out, like something vital had been ripped away. The whispers grew louder around us. I could feel every eye on me, waiting for me to break. Charles folded his arms, victorious. "You see, Ethan? Even your own wife isn't sure. This is what I've been saying all along." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Charles had ever said. But as I looked around at the smug smiles, the judgmental stares, the pity, I felt something shift inside me. I straightened my back. My hands stopped trembling. And for the first time, I looked Charles directly in the eye without flinching. "You think my worth is measured by money," I said, my voice steady. "You think being a man is about the size of your house or the number of zeros in your bank account. But let me tell you something. Dignity isn't bought. Love isn't bought. Respect isn't bought." The room went quiet again. People turned toward me, surprised at the strength in my tone. I took a step closer to Charles. "You call me small because I drive delivery. But every day I get up before sunrise, I work until my body aches, and I do it with honesty. I don't cheat. I don't step on people. I don't manipulate my own family. Can you say the same?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Charles's smile faltered. I turned to Rachel then, my voice softening. "Yes, I heard what he said. That you've doubted me. That you've wondered if I'm enough. Maybe I'm not enough for this world, Rachel. Maybe I'll never wear the suits, shake the hands, or sit in the boardrooms your father lives in. But I know this. I've given you every ounce of my heart. And if that's not enough for you, then nothing ever will be." Rachel's tears spilled over. She tried to speak, but no words came. I faced the room again, lifting my chin. "I may not be rich. I may not have your approval, but I refuse to be ashamed of honest work. If that makes me unworthy in your eyes, then so be it. I'd rather be nothing in this room than lose myself trying to be what I'm not." For a long moment, there was silence. No one moved. Even Charles didn't speak, his jaw tight, his eyes blazing with a fury he could no longer hide. And in that silence, I realized something powerful. I wasn't the one who looked small anymore. He did. After that night, everything changed. I didn't wait for Rachel to explain, and I didn't wait for Charles to gloat. I packed a bag and left the house we shared. For days, I stayed with a friend, trying to clear my head. The pain of Rachel's silence at the party kept replaying in my mind, but alongside it was something else, relief. For the first time, I had spoken my truth without fear. I decided then that I was done chasing Charles's approval. I was done bending myself to fit into a world that never wanted me. If I was going to rise, it would be on my own terms. I threw myself into work, but this time with a plan. I took the little savings I had and started small, doing independent deliveries, contracting for local businesses that needed someone reliable. Word spread quickly. People trusted me because I showed up on time, treated their goods with care, and never made excuses. Within months, I wasn't just a delivery driver anymore. I had a small network, a handful of drivers working with me. It was still modest, but it was mine. Rachel reached out, calling and texting. At first, I ignored her. I needed space. But one evening, she came to see me. She looked tired, her face pale, her eyes full of regret. "Ethan," she said softly, "I'm sorry. I should have stood by you. I let him get in my head. I was scared, but I never stopped loving you." I studied her for a long moment. Part of me wanted to pull her into my arms. Another part of me remembered her silence while her father humiliated. "You have to understand," I told her quietly. "Love isn't enough if it bends every time the wind blows. If you're with me, it has to be because you believe in me, not because you're afraid of disappointing your father." Tears ran down her cheeks. "I know. I've told him I won't let him control me anymore. If I have to choose, I choose you." It wasn't easy to trust her again, but slowly, we began to rebuild. She supported my work, helped with planning, even rode with me sometimes when I was too tired. And with her by my side, I felt stronger than ever. Meanwhile, Charles's image began to crack. Word spread in his business circles about how he meddled in Rachel's marriage, how he sabotaged opportunities for me out of pride. Some of his associates, tired of his arrogance, began to distance themselves. It wasn't a public scandal, but in his world, reputation was everything. His whispers of power turned into whispers of shame. I didn't need revenge. Seeing him lose the control he once had was enough. Months later, at another family gathering, I showed up not as the delivery boy everyone laughed at, but as the owner of a growing delivery service. I shook hands confidently, no longer shrinking under anyone's gaze. Charles barely looked at me, but it didn't matter. His opinion no longer defined me. I realized then that true success wasn't about the money or the recognition. It was about walking into a room without shame, about knowing you built something with your own two hands. For years, I had been chasing his respect. Now I didn't need it. I had found something stronger, self-respect. And that was worth more than all the approval in the world. One evening, after a long day of work, I sat on the porch of my small house. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and gold. For the first time in a long while, I felt peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because I knew who I was. Rachel sat beside me. She had chosen to stay, to fight for us, and I believed her. But even if she hadn't, I would have been fine. I finally understood that my worth was not tied to anyone's opinion. Not Charles's, not even hers. I thought back to the night at the dinner table, when Charles asked me if I deserved his daughter. Back then, his words cut me like a knife. Now, they no longer had power over me. I didn't need to prove myself to him, or anyone else. My life, my love, my dignity, that was proof enough. I smiled to myself as the cool evening breeze touched my face. For years, I had been ashamed of being a delivery driver, of being less, in the eyes of men like Charles. But shame is a lie. There is no shame in honest work, in building something with your own hands, in standing tall no matter how others look at you. That was the lesson life had forced me to learn the hard way. And though the journey had been painful, I was grateful for it, because it shaped me into a man who could finally hold his head high. As the sky darkened and the stars began to show, I whispered to myself, I am enough. And for the first time, I truly believed it. Hey besties, thanks for watching till the end of this emotional story. Ethan was judged for being a delivery driver, rejected by his father-in-law, and nearly lost everything. But in the end, he found dignity, strength, and self-worth. Honest work is never shameful. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories. See you in the next one. Bye.